The restaurant went quiet. Not because of a fight, not because someone was yelling, but because one of the most feared men in New York had just looked at a waitress and decided to humiliate her. She was carrying a tray of coffee, a plus-size woman in a simple uniform. Easy to overlook, easy to judge, at least that's what he thought. The Mafia Boss leaned back in his chair and said something in Arabic. A cruel comment. The men sitting around him burst into laughter. They thought she wouldn't understand. Most people wouldn't have, but they were wrong. The waitress calmly placed a cup of coffee on the table, looked him straight in the eyes, and answered in flawless Arabic. The laughter died instantly. Then she said something else, this time in English. Something nobody in that room would ever forget. You hide behind fear because you're too much of a coward to earn real respect. And for the first time in years, the Mafia Boss said nothing. Nobody knew it yet, but that moment was about to change both of their lives forever. For a few seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even the waiters standing near the kitchen entrance seemed frozen. The entire restaurant was staring at the same thing. Not the waitress, the Mafia Boss. Because everyone was waiting to see what he would do next. His name was Vincent Moretti in New York's private circles. People rarely said it out loud. Not because they weren't allowed to, because they didn't want to. Fear had a strange way of teaching people respect. Or at least, something that looked like respect. For more than 20 years, Vincent had built a reputation that followed him into every room. Businessmen lowered their voices when he entered. Politicians suddenly became polite, and men twice his size carefully chose their words. Nobody challenged him. Nobody embarrassed him, and absolutely nobody called him a coward, especially not in public. Yet that was exactly what had just happened. The men at his table exchanged nervous looks. A moment ago they had been laughing. Now none of them seemed interested in smiling. One of them even reached for his water glass with a shaking hand, because they all knew the same thing. A single sentence from Vincent could ruin someone's life, and this waitress had just handed him a reason. But Vincent didn't react. Not immediately. He simply stared at her, his face unreadable, his eyes calm, which somehow made the situation even worse. The waitress stood her ground. She didn't apologize. She didn't look away. She didn't try to explain herself, and that confused everyone. Most people folded under pressure, especially under Vincent's pressure. This woman didn't. For several seconds, they looked at each other. Two people from completely different worlds. One surrounded by power, the other carrying a coffee tray. Then something unexpected happened. Vincent smiled, not a friendly smile, not even a happy one, just the corner of his mouth moving slightly, as if he had discovered something interesting, something worth paying attention to. Finally, he spoke, in English this time. What's your name? The room practically leaned forward. The waitress answered without hesitation. Emily. Emily. What? Just Emily. A few people chuckled nervously. Vincent didn't. His eyes never left hers, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. Eventually he nodded, then picked up his coffee, and dismissed her with a small wave of his hand. That should have been the end of it. At least, that's what everyone thought. Emily walked away, back toward the kitchen, back toward her shift, back toward her ordinary life, or so she believed, because what she didn't know was that Vincent Moretti had already lost interest in thousands of people over the years. But not this time. The moment she disappeared through the kitchen doors, he turned toward the man sitting beside him, a man named Carlo, one of the few people he trusted, and in a voice so quiet, nobody else could hear. Vincent gave a single instruction. Find out who she is. Carlo frowned. A waitress? Vincent took another sip of coffee, still staring at the kitchen entrance. She's not just a waitress, and somehow that simple order would become the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. The next morning, Emily arrived at work at 6:30, just like she always did. No security escort, no expensive car, no dramatic entrance. Just a woman carrying a worn backpack and a cup of coffee she had made at home. If you saw her walking down the street, you probably wouldn't notice her. Most people didn't, and honestly, she was used to that. Emily had spent most of her life being underestimated, sometimes because of her job, sometimes because of her appearance, and sometimes because people simply decided who she was before she ever opened her mouth. It happened so often that she stopped being surprised by it years ago. What still surprised her was how often they turned out to be wrong. The morning rush hit the restaurant hard. Orders piled up. Customers complained. Coffee machines hissed nonstop. And through it all, Emily worked quietly, patiently, the same way she always did. What nobody around her knew was that this wasn't the life she had imagined growing up. When she was a little girl, her world looked very different. Her father wasn't a businessman, or a politician, or anyone famous. He was a linguistics professor, a man obsessed with languages. He believed every language opened a door into another way of thinking, and he spent his life chasing those doors. When Emily was 10 years old, his research took their family overseas. Not for weeks, not for months, for years. One country became another, one city became the next. Jordan, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, places most Americans only knew from television. While other children spent summers at camp, Emily spent hers sitting in crowded markets, listening, learning, watching. Her father had a rule. If you want people to trust you, learn their language first. At first, she hated it. The grammar, the pronunciation, the endless corrections. But eventually something changed. Arabic stopped sounding foreign. It started feeling familiar. By her teenage years, she spoke it naturally. Not perfectly, not at first, but well enough that locals often forgot she wasn't from there. And that changed her, because language did something powerful. It allowed her to see people beyond appearances, beyond stereotypes, beyond assumptions. Something her father reminded her of constantly. People reveal who they are when they think you don't understand. Emily never forgot those words. Years later, they would prove him right again, and again and again. But life wasn't always easy. When Emily was 17, everything changed. Her mother became seriously ill. Medical bills began piling up. Research opportunities disappeared. The family returned to America much sooner than expected. Nothing felt the same after that. Her father tried to rebuild his career, but academia can be unforgiving. One setback became another. Financial pressure grew, stress followed, and eventually the life they had known disappeared. Emily learned something during those years. Pride doesn't pay hospital bills. Hard work does, so she worked any job she could find. Bookstores, coffee shops, retail counters, night shifts, weekend shifts, anything. She never complained, at least not publicly, because she understood something many people didn't. Difficult times don't care how intelligent you are, or how talented or how educated. Sometimes survival is the only goal, and survival requires humility. That's why comments about her job never bothered her much. Comments about her weight? Those hurt sometimes. She was human. Of course they hurt. But she had heard them for so many years that they no longer controlled her. People could mock her appearance. What they couldn't do was define her worth. And that's exactly why she wasn't afraid of Vincent Moretti. She wasn't impressed by power. She wasn't intimidated by status. And she certainly wasn't impressed by men who expected fear from strangers. Because, in her experience, the strongest people she'd ever met never demanded respect. They earned it. That was the lesson her father had spent a lifetime teaching her. The same lesson that had slipped out of her mouth in the restaurant. The same lesson that had frozen a mafia boss in silence. But there was one thing Vincent's investigators hadn't discovered yet. One part of Emily's past. A part she never talked about. A part connected to the final year she spent in the Middle East. And if Vincent ever learned the truth about what happened there, he would understand why she looked completely fearless that night. 3 days later, Carlo walked into Vincent Moretti's office carrying a thin black folder. That alone was unusual. Most investigations involving ordinary people produced almost nothing. A few addresses, a social media account, maybe an old employment record, but this one was different. Vincent noticed it immediately. "Well?" he asked. Carlo sat down. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely puzzled. "I don't understand her." Vincent raised an eyebrow. That wasn't an answer. Carlo opened the folder. Emily Carter, 32 years old, works 6 days a week, no criminal record, no debts, no lawsuits, no scandals. Vincent waited. There had to be more, there always was. Carlo flipped another page. Former honor student, speaks Arabic, speaks French. Some Persian. Vincent looked up. Persian too. Carlo nodded. Apparently. That wasn't normal. Not for someone working double shifts in a Manhattan restaurant. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Already interested, Carlo continued. Her professors described her as exceptional. Several graduate programs wanted her. She turned them down. Why? Family situation. Vincent said nothing. Carlo kept reading. After her mother's illness, she dropped everything. No complaints, no public fundraising, no interviews, no sympathy campaigns. She just went to work. The office fell quiet. That part caught Vincent's attention, because he had spent his entire life around people who wanted something. Money, influence, protection, recognition. Everyone seemed hungry for something. Emily didn't, and that made her difficult to understand. Carlo closed the folder. There's something else. Vincent immediately noticed the change in his voice. Something about this part mattered. What? Carlo hesitated, which almost never happened. I spoke to one of her former professors, and he said Emily was the bravest student he ever met. Vincent frowned slightly. Bravest? That's the word he used. Vincent almost laughed. People threw that word around too easily. Real courage was rare. Most people confused courage with confidence. The two weren't the same. Carlo continued. The professor told me something that happened overseas. Vincent looked interested again. Go on. Apparently there was an incident during her final year in the Middle East. What kind of incident? He wouldn't tell me. Vincent stared at him. What do you mean he wouldn't tell you? He said it wasn't his story to share. That answer annoyed Vincent. People usually talked when asked, especially when Carlo was asking, but apparently not this time. Did he say anything at all? Carlo nodded slowly. Just one thing. The room grew quiet, he said. If Emily ever tells you what happened, you'll understand why she isn't afraid of powerful men. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Vincent found himself thinking back to the restaurant, back to her eyes, back to the moment she called him a coward. There had been no anger there, no panic, no desperation, just certainty, as if she genuinely meant every word, as if she had seen men like him before. And somehow that bothered him more than the insult itself, because Vincent had spent years building an image powerful enough to control entire rooms. Yet one waitress had looked straight through it, not around it, not past it, through it. A few days later, he found himself returning to the restaurant. Officially, he was there for a business meeting. At least that's what everyone else believed. But the truth was much simpler. He wanted answers. The meeting ended after 40 minutes. The others left. Vincent remained seated, watching, waiting, and eventually Emily appeared, carrying a tray, moving between tables, completely unaware that someone was studying her from across the room. Or maybe she was aware, because after a few minutes, she suddenly looked up. Their eyes met again, and instead of looking away, she walked directly toward his table. More coffee? She asked. No fear, no hesitation, nothing. Vincent stared at her for a moment. Then something happened that surprised even him. For the first time since they met, he asked her a genuine question. Not as a mafia boss, not as a powerful man, just as a curious human being. Where did you learn to stop being afraid? And for the first time, Emily's expression changed, only slightly but enough. Enough for Vincent to realize he had finally touched the one subject she didn't want to discuss. Emily didn't answer right away for a moment. She simply looked at Vincent. Then she poured his coffee, slowly, carefully, as if considering whether the question deserved an answer. Finally, she smiled. Not a happy smile, more like someone remembering something difficult. You don't stop being afraid. She placed the pot back on her tray. You just learn there are things worse than fear. Then she walked away, leaving Vincent sitting there with more questions than answers, and strangely, he found himself thinking about that sentence for days, because he understood fear better than most people. He had built an empire using it. But Emily spoke about fear differently, as if she had survived something much bigger than intimidation, something bigger than him, and that thought refused to leave his mind. Meanwhile, Emily's life continued exactly as before, or at least it seemed that way. The restaurant was busy. Customers came and went. Tips were average. Bills still needed to be paid. Nothing looked different, but people had started noticing something. Vincent Moretti kept showing up. Not every day, just often enough. And in a city like New York, people notice patterns, especially jealous people, especially insecure people. One of them was Amanda, a hostess who had worked at the restaurant for nearly 4 years. Amanda was beautiful. Everyone said so. She knew it too. For years she had enjoyed being the center of attention. until Emily unexpectedly became the topic everyone discussed. Amanda hated that. She hated it even more when rumors started spreading. "Did you hear?" Vincent asked for Emily's section again. "I heard they talked yesterday. Maybe he likes her." The comments grew worse every week. Most of them were harmless. Some weren't. One afternoon, Amanda cornered Emily near the employee lockers. There were 3 other staff members nearby, close enough to hear everything. Amanda crossed her arms. "Can I ask you something?" Emily already knew where this was going. "Sure," Amanda laughed. A fake laugh, the kind people use when they're trying to be cruel. "What exactly does a guy like Vincent see in someone like you?" The hallway became quiet. Everyone pretended not to listen, but everyone listened. Amanda looked Emily up and down. Slowly, deliberately. "You work in a restaurant. You wear the same uniform every day. And let's be honest." Her eyes drifted toward Emily's body. "You don't exactly fit the picture." Nobody spoke, nobody defended her, and honestly, that hurt more than Amanda's words, because silence often reveals what people really think. Emily had experienced moments like this before, many times. When she was younger, comments like that ruined entire weeks, sometimes months, but not anymore. She looked at Amanda calmly, then asked a simple question. "Do you feel better now?" Amanda blinked. "What?" Emily adjusted her backpack. "If hurting someone makes you feel stronger." "I genuinely hope it worked." The hallway fell silent. Amanda's face changed instantly, because Emily hadn't attacked her. She hadn't insulted her. She hadn't even defended herself. She had simply exposed what everyone could suddenly see. Insecurity, raw insecurity, and there was no comeback for that. Amanda stormed away, furious. The others avoided eye contact. Emily grabbed her things and left. But what happened next was something she never expected. Because someone else had witnessed the entire exchange. Someone sitting alone near the back of the restaurant. Someone who had arrived early for a meeting. Vincent Moretti. He had heard every word, every insult, every cruel implication, and every calm response. Most people would have fought back. Emily didn't. Most people would have cried later. Emily didn't. Most people would have tried to prove their worth. Emily didn't, and for reasons he couldn't explain. That impressed him. Far more than speaking Arabic ever had, because language could be learned. Character was different. Character revealed itself under pressure. And Emily kept revealing the same thing, again and again and again. The problem was, not everyone admired that strength. Some people resented it. A lot. And one of those people was about to make a decision that would put Emily in real danger. A danger far bigger than a few cruel words in a hallway. The trouble started with a lie. A small one at first. The kind people tell when they think nobody will check. A week after the incident with Amanda. A customer complained that money was missing from his coat pocket. The accusation spread through the restaurant within minutes, and somehow, Emily's name became attached to it. No evidence, no witnesses, just whispers. But whispers can be dangerous, especially when enough people want to believe them. The restaurant manager called Emily into his office. She knew something was wrong. The moment she walked in, the manager wouldn't look her in the eye. That was never a good sign. He cleared his throat, then slid a written complaint across the desk. Emily read it once, then again, still unable to believe it. "Do you think I stole from a customer?" The manager sighed. "It doesn't matter what I think." That answer told her everything. Because what he really meant was this. The truth wasn't important. The accusation was. Emily sat quietly for a moment, then nodded. Not because she accepted it, because she was tired. Tired of fighting assumptions. Tired of proving herself to people who had already made up their minds. Outside the office, several employees were watching, waiting. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked satisfied. Amanda was one of them, and Emily noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. The manager finally spoke. "I'm suspending you until we sort this out." The words landed like a punch, not because she was guilty, because she needed the job. Rent didn't stop. Bills didn't stop. Life certainly didn't stop. Emily left the office carrying a small cardboard box filled with her belongings. The same way countless innocent people have walked out of workplaces throughout history. Not defeated, just exhausted. What she didn't know was that someone else had already heard the story. Vincent Moretti. The information reached him that same afternoon. At first, he ignored it. It wasn't his business. It shouldn't have mattered, but something felt wrong. The story didn't fit. Emily wasn't perfect. Nobody was, but theft? That didn't sound like her, not even close. So Vincent did something unusual. He started asking questions. Real questions. Within 24 hours, the truth surfaced. The customer had lied. Security footage proved it. The wallet had never been stolen. It had fallen between the cushions of a private booth. Exactly where staff later found it. Case closed. Simple. At least it should have been. But Vincent kept digging, because now he wanted to know something else. Who had benefited from the accusation? The answer arrived quickly. Too quickly. Amanda. Several messages. Several conversations. Several witnesses. Enough to paint a very ugly picture. The accusation hadn't been random. Someone had helped create it. Someone had encouraged it. Someone wanted Emily gone. And suddenly, Vincent felt something he rarely felt. Anger. Not explosive anger. Cold anger. The dangerous kind. The kind that moved quietly. A few days later, Emily returned to work. Officially cleared. Officially innocent. But anyone who has ever been falsely accused knows the truth. The damage never disappears completely. People still stare, still wonder, still gossip. Emily understood that. She simply wanted to move on. What she didn't expect was to find Vincent waiting for her after her shift. He stood outside the restaurant, hands in his coat pockets, watching the city lights. When she approached, he turned toward her. For a second, neither spoke. Then, Vincent broke the silence. "You should have fought harder." Emily looked surprised. "For what? For yourself," she smiled softly. Not because she agreed, because she understood. "You think every battle needs to be won." Vincent said nothing. Emily continued. "Some battles just reveal who people are." The city noise filled the silence between them. Car horns, distant sirens, footsteps. Life moving around them. Then, Vincent asked something unexpected. "Do you ever get tired?" Emily laughed quietly. A real laugh this time. "Every day." "Then why keep doing it?" Her answer came immediately. Because she had probably asked herself the same question 100 times. Because becoming bitter would hurt me more than it hurts them. Vincent looked away. Toward the traffic, toward the city he had spent decades controlling. And for the first time, he realized Emily possessed something he never had. Peace. Not happiness, not comfort. Peace, and strangely, that made him respect her more than any act of courage ever could. But neither of them knew that someone else was watching. From across the street, inside a parked car, a man with a camera. A man who had been paid to follow Emily and the photographs he was taking tonight. Were about to create a problem neither Vincent nor Emily saw coming. The photographs spread faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, half of Manhattan's social circles had seen them. Vincent Moretti, standing outside a restaurant, talking to a waitress, laughing, listening, looking interested. That was all. Nothing scandalous, nothing romantic, just a conversation. But powerful people attract rumors the way fire attracts attention, and rumors have a way of becoming stories. Then stories become weapons. Especially in New York, especially among wealthy people, the photographs eventually found their way into the hands of people who disliked Vincent. Business rivals, social rivals. People who had spent years pretending to respect him. They saw an opportunity, not to attack Vincent directly. That was too dangerous. Instead, they targeted Emily. Because attacking someone powerless is always easier. A few days later, one of New York's most exclusive charity galas filled an entire ballroom overlooking the city skyline. Politicians attended, executives attended, media figures attended, and naturally Vincent attended. The event was supposed to be elegant, predictable, forgettable, until someone decided otherwise. Near the middle of the evening, a giant screen displayed photographs celebrating community achievements. Then suddenly, the images changed. Several photographs of Emily appeared. One after another, the restaurant, the sidewalk, the conversations with Vincent. Murmurs immediately swept through the room. People turned toward Vincent. Whispers spread. Smirks appeared. Someone wanted a public humiliation, and they wanted it now. Then came the comments, not directly. People like that are rarely direct. They hide cruelty behind jokes, behind smiles, behind fake concern. A woman standing near the front laughed softly. A waitress. Another man shook his head. Strange choice, someone else added. I guess standards really are changing. The laughter grew. Small, polite, cruel. Exactly the way social cruelty often works. And then someone said the thing nobody else was willing to say. Loud enough for the entire ballroom. Maybe she impressed him with her menu recommendations. More laughter, this time louder, meaner. The kind designed to make someone feel small. The kind designed to remind people where they belong. Unfortunately for them, Emily was standing only a few feet away, because one of the charity organizers had invited restaurant staff to help manage the event. Including her, for a moment, the room watched her, waiting, expecting embarrassment, expecting tears, expecting humiliation instead. Emily simply stood there, quiet, calm, exactly as she had in the restaurant, exactly as she had in the hallway, exactly as she always did. But this time something different happened. Before she could respond, someone else stood up, Vincent Moretti. The room immediately fell silent, not because they respected him, because they feared what might happen next. Vincent looked around the ballroom slowly. No rush, no anger, just disappointment, the kind that somehow felt worse. Then he spoke. Interesting. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Vincent continued, "You people spend millions attending charity events. You give speeches about dignity, about kindness, about inclusion." His eyes moved across the room, one face at a time, and the moment you see someone different, you become exactly the people you pretend to oppose. The silence became unbearable. Several guests looked away. Vincent wasn't finished, not even close. He turned toward Emily, then back toward the crowd. This woman has shown more courage than most people in this room combined. Nobody laughed now, nobody smiled. You mock her job, yet she works harder than half of you. You mock her appearance, as if character can be measured with a mirror. Every word landed harder than the last, because everyone knew he was right, and everyone knew he meant it. Then came the moment nobody expected. Vincent smiled slightly, looking directly at Emily. "You know, the first thing she ever called me was a coward." A wave of shock moved through the ballroom. Several people actually gasped. Vincent ignored them, and she was brave enough to say it to my face. The room became completely silent. Not awkwardly silent, reverently silent, because for the first time, they weren't seeing Vincent Moretti, the Mafia Boss. They were seeing a man publicly admitting respect for someone who had challenged him, someone society considered insignificant. Vincent looked around one final time, then delivered the sentence people would remember long after the gala ended. "The difference between her and the rest of you is that she never needed power to tell the truth." Nobody answered. Nobody could, because deep down every person in that ballroom knew exactly who had won. And for the first time in her life, Emily wasn't the one standing alone. The story spread across New York within days. Not because of the photographs, not because of the gala, and not even because of Vincent Moretti. People talked about the story because it felt different. For once, the person with the most power in the room hadn't used it to dominate someone. He had used it to defend them, and that surprised people a lot. The charity gala ended. The headlines faded. The gossip moved on, as it always does. But something had changed. Not in New York, in Vincent. A week later, he returned to the restaurant. The same table, the same coffee, the same waitress. Emily walked over, carrying a pot of fresh coffee. When she reached the table, she shook her head. A small smile appeared on her face. "You know people are still talking about that night." Vincent looked amused. "People always talk." True, she poured the coffee. But most of them don't stand up and embarrass half of Manhattan for the first time. Vincent laughed, a genuine laugh, the kind almost nobody ever heard. And that was when Emily realized something. The man sitting in front of her wasn't the same man she had challenged weeks earlier. He still carried power. He still carried influence, but there was something else now. Humility. Not much, just enough to matter. Vincent looked out the window, watching people move through the city. Then he asked a question. "Do you regret saying it?" Emily knew exactly what he meant. The word. Coward. The insult that started everything. She thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "A little." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "A little?" Emily nodded. Today I'd probably use a different word that made him laugh again. The city moved around them. Car sirens. People rushing somewhere important. For a while neither of them spoke, and strangely, the silence felt comfortable. Not awkward, not tense, just peaceful. Eventually, Emily glanced at the clock. Back to work. Back to normal life. At least as normal as life could be after everything that had happened. Before she walked away, Vincent spoke one last time. "Emily," she turned. "What?" He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. something he wasn't known for. Then he said, "Thank you." Emily looked genuinely confused. "For what?" Vincent stared into his coffee. For a moment he looked older, not weaker, just more honest. Then he answered, "For being brave enough to tell me the truth." Emily didn't respond immediately. She simply nodded, then returned to work, and that could have been the end of the story. Maybe it should have been. But sometimes the most important endings are the quiet ones, the ones without applause, the ones without grand speeches, the ones where people simply leave a little better than they arrived. Because the truth is, Emily never needed wealth, she never needed status, she never needed power, the thing everyone else spent their lives chasing. She already had self-respect, and in the end, that turned out to be stronger than fear, stronger than influence, stronger than reputation, even stronger than a mafia boss. Because real respect cannot be demanded, it cannot be bought, and it certainly cannot be forced. It can only be earned.